Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. On the agenda tonight we have Elizabeth Cotten, and this is the first guitarist that I've featured who was born in the 1800s. Elizabeth was born in 1893, and this is going to be a performance when she's in her mid to late 70s, and it's going to be a song that she doesn't have a name for. She says just before this that she just makes up songs and then asks people to then name the songs. So let's get Elizabeth up on screen and see how she gets on.
And somebody told me yesterday about the name. It's just a little something, I don't know.
Okay, maybe we can think of a good name for it. Very nice.
And there we go, that's it. So the first thing to mention about Elizabeth and her playing, eagle-eyed viewers out there would have noticed the fact that her guitar is strung exactly like you would do if you were playing it as a right-handed guitarist, whereas she's playing it left-handed. So it means that all of her strings are effectively upside down, which means that when you're playing in a style like this, and this is actually called cotton picking, because obviously named after Elizabeth, but the way that she's actually picking through the strings, it means that everything is reversed. So if you handed this guitar to another left-handed guitarist, they would not be able to play fingerstyle on this, because the way that Elizabeth is playing, she's playing the lead melody with her thumb, and she's playing those counter bass melodies with that first finger and second finger as well. So having it totally round the other way is a totally unique way of doing it. And that just originated from Elizabeth using her brother's banjo when she was 7 and playing it left-handed, but just keeping it strung exactly the same way as somebody would play right-handed. So when she moved onto the guitar, she then strung the guitar in exactly the same way that she'd been playing banjo. And of course, when she was learning to play, she was self-taught, and back in the early 1900s, when you're self-taught, you really are self-taught. You can't exactly just hop on a laptop and load up YouTube and get some free lessons. So just working it out for herself, working her own way through that finger style. If you're listening to this, or if anybody else was listening to this who played guitar, they would assume that she was playing standard fingerstyle with that thumb playing those root notes, and then the first finger, second finger, and third finger playing those counter melodies up at the top. Of course, nowhere to hide on acoustic, as I always say. Getting these chord shapes down, they're not easy chord shapes, and she's also putting in a little hammer-on in there within the runs. So there's some impressive work going onto that fretboard. She also said herself that when she did get that banjo, then there was no silence in the house from that time onwards because she was always playing. And at age 11, when she did actually have a guitar, she then started writing songs, and at that age is when she actually wrote one of her biggest well-known songs called Freight Train. And at age 13, she started working with her mother as a maid, and by the time she was 17, she got married. And at this point, she started a family, and that's when she then gave up playing the guitar. So she had a long time without playing because she was just raising a family, and she wouldn't really play at all. The story goes that Ruth Crawford Seeger was out shopping at a department store where Elizabeth was working at the time, and Ruth had lost her child, her daughter. So Elizabeth was then responsible for getting them back together and finding each other, and soon after that, Elizabeth then started to work for Ruth as a maid and also looking after their children. And the Seeger family were a really musical family, so Elizabeth picked up the guitar and now had to try and remember how to play because it had been over 40 years since she'd last picked up a guitar. So she did. She started to get that muscle memory going again and started playing through some of the tunes that she'd written so long ago. I'm sure she would have got the guitar out to entertain the children. Being from such a musical family, I'm sure they would have enjoyed that. But then 10 to 15 years later, Mike Seeger, who was one of the children that Elizabeth was looking after, he started to make reel-to-reel recordings of Elizabeth's playing. And that was actually released as an album, and that was called Folk Songs and Instrumentals with Guitar. So with the album coming out in the late 50s, in the early 60s, Elizabeth then started to play concerts. And she was actually on the same bill as a guy called Muddy Waters. And if you don't know who Muddy is, I've featured him on this channel, so check out that video if you want to see him in action. But she just kept on playing and performing and writing with her grandchildren. And then well into her 80s, she's still writing, recording as well, and touring. Elizabeth's music has been cited as a major influence on the skiffle genre in the UK, and that was around the 1950s is when it was popular, and it was jazz, blues and folk kind of all rolled into one. And the interesting thing about that genre is that people played homemade instruments as well as manufactured instruments. But Elizabeth Cotten, just a great example of somebody figuring the guitar out for themselves, not following any rules, and just to put it in perspective, she found success so late on in her life, and I would say career, but she gave up playing. She didn't play for 40 years, so she really did pick it up, as we can see in this video, that she really got into it later in life and started playing so much more. And again, a lot of the players that cover her tracks, Freight Train is probably the most covered by people like Jerry Garcia and Bob Dylan and Doc Watson as well. And she wrote that track when she was 11 years old, her most covered track. So it's mightily impressive to have that amount of appreciation of melody, but also technical ability to write that when you're only 11 years of age. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.